It was supposed to be just another routine day at the courthouse. The marble floors gleamed under the morning sun, the smell of freshly brewed coffee lingered in the air, and security officers stood at attention near the metal detectors, checking each visitor with practiced indifference. People walked briskly, files in hand, while lawyers whispered strategies to their clients in the echoing corridors. But no one, not the clerk at the front desk, not the nervous defendants waiting their turn, not even the officers in uniform had any idea that today, everything was about to change. At the heart of it all was a woman named Simone Harper. Tall, calm, and dignified, Simone walked into the courthouse wearing a crisp navy suit and carrying nothing more than a slim folder and a soft leather bag. Her presence was quiet but powerful. Every step she took seemed to carry a weight, a calm authority that turned heads, even if people didn't understand why. She didn't smile much, but when she did, it was genuine. She looked like someone who knew more than she said, someone who had earned her place wherever she stood. And though she walked past dozens of officers and courthouse staff, barely anyone noticed her, or so they thought. One man did notice. Officer Brent Kavanaugh. Mid-40s, sharp-eyed and often too quick to judge, Brent was stationed at the side entrance that morning. To him, Simone was just another black woman trying to walk through a door she didn't belong at. He didn't recognize her, didn't ask for her credentials, and certainly didn't pause to wonder why someone so poised seemed so at ease in a place where most people were anxious. Instead, he stepped forward, his jaw tight and his tone sharper than it needed to be. "Ma'am, you're not allowed through this entrance," he barked, blocking her path with one outstretched arm. Simone paused, looked him in the eye, and said with polite calm, "I'm expected inside. I have clearance." But Brent wasn't listening. He'd already made up his mind. Maybe it was the way she carried herself. Maybe it was the color of her skin. Maybe it was just the kind of day he was having. Whatever the reason, Brent leaned and said in a tone that had no place in a courtroom, "I don't care who you think you are. You need to go around the front like everyone else." The hallway went silent. A few heads turned. One young intern clutched her files a little tighter. An elderly man on the bench nearby looked up over his newspaper, sensing something wasn't right. But no one moved. No one stepped in. Simone didn't raise her voice. She didn't flinch. She reached into her bag, slowly, so there'd be no confusion, and pulled out a leather case. She opened it, revealing a silver badge and an official document that shimmered slightly under the fluorescent lights. Brent's smirk faded as his eyes scanned the text. The words "Chief of Police." Simone Harper stared back at him. But before he could process what he'd just read, another voice cut through the tension, a voice full of pain, of history, of something much bigger than the moment at hand. "I used to sit in the back of buses just so men like you could feel important." Everyone turned to see an elderly black man, probably in his late 70s, standing a few feet away. His cane shook slightly in his hand, but his voice was clear. "I thought those days were behind us." Brent didn't know where to look. The silence pressed in on him. He opened his mouth to say something, maybe an apology, maybe an excuse. But Simone stepped forward. "That's enough," she said quietly, addressing Brent. "Step aside." He did, wordlessly, his eyes now fixed on the ground. As Simone walked past him, the air seemed to shift. People began to murmur. Whispers floated through. "The hall? She's the new chief? What just happened?" The clerk who had ignored her earlier now stood with eyes wide in disbelief. Lawyers adjusted their ties. Judges peeked out from chambers. But Simone didn't react. She kept walking, calm and steady. She wasn't here for attention. She was here for change. Outside, the day went on as usual. A city unaware of the moment that had just occurred inside those walls. A city where justice was still tangled with bias, and where people in power sometimes forgot the meaning of their oaths. But Simone hadn't forgotten, and neither had the old man who had spoken up. Earlier that same morning, across town on a crowded city bus, a different story had quietly begun to unfold. One that, in a strange twist of fate, would tie into Simone's day in ways no one could have expected. A 17-year-old high school student named Darius sat near the middle of the bus, backpack on his lap, headphones in his ears. He wasn't in a rush. He rarely was. But he kept his eyes open. Darius had grown up knowing the world didn't always treat people like him kindly, but he'd also grown up believing that kindness wasn't weakness. So when a visibly pregnant woman stepped onto the bus looking around for a seat with growing discomfort, Darius didn't hesitate. He stood up, pulled out his earbuds, and gestured to her with a soft smile. "You can take my seat, ma'am," he said. She looked surprised, maybe even a little emotional. Most people had kept their heads down when she walked on. But this young man had noticed her, had stood for her without being asked. She sat down gratefully, murmuring a quiet, "Thank you, sweetheart." Darius nodded and moved to stand near the back, grabbing a pole as the bus jolted forward again. What he didn't see was the way she kept glancing at him, the way her hand went to her purse, the way she paused before pulling out a folded note. When she finally stood to leave at her stop, she pressed the note into his hand without a word. Then she was gone. Darius looked at the paper, confused. It was just a small piece, torn at the edge, but the words written inside would send ripples through his life in ways he could never have imagined. And what neither Simone Harper nor Darius knew yet was that their paths were about to cross. Because sometimes stories don't begin and end where we think they will. Sometimes they stretch across cities, between generations, through pain and hope and quiet acts of courage. And sometimes it takes a moment of injustice for truth to rise, for hidden power to reveal itself, and for the world to see who really leads with strength. But just as the pieces were starting to come together, just as the courthouse began to stir with whispers and the city held its breath for what would come next, the radio on Brent Kavanaugh's shoulder crackled to life. "All units, code red. We have a situation in Chamber 3. Officer assistance needed immediately." Simone froze mid-step. Her eyes narrowed. "Chamber 3?" she said quietly, almost to herself, and without another word, she turned and began to run. Whatever was waiting inside that courtroom, it was about to test everything she believed in. And Brent? He was about to learn that when you try to push someone down, sometimes you're pushing them straight into the spotlight, because the woman he had just disrespected wasn't just the chief of police, she was his new boss. And what happened next would leave the entire courthouse speechless. Simone's heels echoed sharply against the polished floor as she moved down the hallway with purpose. Every step was fast, focused. The courthouse, once calm, had started to buzz with tension. A few people stepped aside, unsure whether to follow or stay put. Her eyes didn't flinch. Her badge clipped at her side now gleamed in full view. But no one dared to stop her this time. Behind her, Officer Brent Kavanaugh stood frozen. His jaw clenched, his face red with embarrassment and something else, confusion. He had no idea who Simone was when he confronted her. And now he had no idea what to do. Protocol said he should follow. His pride said otherwise. But something deeper, something uncomfortable crawled beneath his skin. Guilt, regret, and a flicker of fear. In Chamber 3, the tension was thicker than the air. A public hearing had been scheduled that morning. A small claims case involving a business owner and a former employee. Nothing out of the ordinary. But the room had grown tense after a few sharp exchanges, and no one expected it to escalate. Yet now, the presiding judge had hit the emergency button beneath the bench. That only happened in extreme situations. By the time Simone reached the door, 2 junior officers were already outside, unsure whether to go in without a direct order. They looked at her, eyes wide. She didn't pause. She pushed the doors open. Inside, the room was frozen. A courtroom officer, one not in uniform, stood too close to a woman seated at the plaintiff's table. His hand gripped her wrist, not roughly, but in a way that sent a clear message. He was asserting control, and the woman's face was tight with emotion, her voice shaking as she repeated, "Let go of me." I didn't do anything wrong. The judge had risen from his seat but hadn't moved down. He was older, cautious, and likely didn't expect this kind of situation in his courtroom. The bailiff stood on the far side, unsure whether to step in. And that's when Simone's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Officer, release her. Now." The man, Officer Rhodes, as Simone instantly recognized, looked up, startled. His grip loosened, and the woman pulled her wrist free, standing quickly and stepping back. Her eyes flicked to Simone, confused but relieved. Simone took a step forward. "Are you all right?" she asked gently. The woman nodded slowly. Her name tag identified her as Nadine Lewis, small business owner according to the docket. No threat, no reason for this kind of treatment. Just another black woman caught in a moment she didn't deserve. Officer Rhodes opened his mouth, but Simone didn't wait. "What's your badge number?" "Chief, He started, trying to recover, but she raised a hand. "I said badge number." There was silence. 6793, he finally muttered. She nodded, turned slightly to the judge. "I'll handle this from here, Your Honor. Thank you for activating the emergency signal." The judge gave a hesitant nod. "Please do what you need to do." As Rhodes stepped back, clearly trying to figure out how much trouble he was in, Brent finally entered the room. He stood at the doorway, eyes darting from Rhodes to Simone to the shaken woman who now sat down again, breathing hard. Simone turned to him. "You're with me. Let's step outside." Brent hesitated. "Chief, Now," he followed. Back in the hallway, Simone's tone shifted. It wasn't angry. It was calm, colder than before, and precise. "You both need to understand something. Every time you step into a courthouse or a patrol car, you're not just carrying a badge. You're carrying the trust of a whole community. When you misuse that trust, you don't just embarrass yourself. You damage everything we stand for." Brent stood stiff, his face unreadable. Rhodes looked down, then up again, clearly nervous. She was getting loud, disruptive. "She was scared," Simone corrected. "There's a difference, and you don't get to decide how someone reacts to being disrespected." The hallway was quiet again. No one else dared approach. For a moment, Simone just looked at the two men. Not in anger, but in something deeper. Disappointment. And behind her calm exterior, something burned. A lifetime of witnessing this kind of behavior. A lifetime of trying to change it. "We're not done," she said finally. "But for now, go and stay out of my sight." They left. Simone leaned against the wall for a moment, breathing deeply. She was used to this, being underestimated, being challenged. But today felt heavier. Maybe because she had only just taken office. Maybe because it was all happening so fast. Or maybe because she had just witnessed two officers in broad daylight show exactly why she had been hired in the first place. But there was no time to reflect. Not yet. She pulled out her phone and opened the email she'd flagged earlier. That morning, it was from the mayor's office. Subject line, urgent. Darius Alexander case file. Her eyes scanned it quickly. Darius, the same teen from the bus. Apparently he'd been flagged in a school incident just a few weeks back. A misunderstanding. He had tried to break up a fight. But somehow the school's security footage caught him in the frame and no one else. The other boys had run off. Darius had stayed behind to help. But by then, a resource officer had already labeled him a threat. No charges were filed, but a note went on his school record. It was enough to affect scholarships, enough to raise red flags. Simone frowned. This wasn't coincidence. The woman on the bus, the note. This file being sent to her now. Something about this felt too connected to ignore. She picked up the phone and called a name she hadn't dialed in months. "Marcus." "Simone, I need you to look into something for me. Quietly, a school record. Darius Alexander. Yes, that's him. Cross-check it with any known cases involving security officer bias. And pull up anything you can on the woman he gave up his seat for this morning." She paused, her mind racing. "Yeah, I think we've just stumbled onto something much bigger than a court incident." In the background, the hum of courthouse life resumed. But Simone couldn't shake the feeling building inside her. Like pieces of a puzzle she hadn't meant to start solving were suddenly aligning. There were too many questions. Why was Darius flagged? Why did the woman give him that note? And how did it all connect to today? One thing was clear. This wasn't over. It hadn't even begun. Simone sat alone in her office, the city lights outside starting to flicker on as daylight gave way to a gray dusk. Her desk was scattered with case files, emails, and an untouched coffee that had long gone cold. The note Darius had received sat open in front of her, printed out from a scan one of her assistants had managed to get. The handwriting was careful, elegant, too deliberate to be casual. It read more like a message than a thank you. It said, "Your kindness has not gone unnoticed. This world sees you as a threat, but I see your strength. The right people will too. Keep your head high. A friend. A friend." That phrase kept echoing in her head. It felt loaded, and yet familiar. Simone tapped the edge of the paper, her mind turning over the possibility that this wasn't just a kind gesture, but a warning. Maybe even a connection to something deeper. She had been in law enforcement, long enough to know when something didn't add up. And from the moment Darius stepped off that bus, nothing had added up. Outside her office door, a soft knock broke the silence. "Come in," she said without looking up. Detective Ray Delgado stepped in, mid-40s, sharp-minded, one of the few people she trusted to speak freely. He closed the door behind him. "You were right to ask about that school file," he said, holding a folder. "There's more to it." Simone motioned for him to continue. Darius didn't just get flagged for breaking up a fight. Turns out the security officer who filed the report, Officer Trent Mallory, has been involved in 3 previous incidents where black students were written up based on flimsy evidence. One was overturned after a parent sued, the other 2 just kind of disappeared. Simone frowned. Patterns. Yeah, and guess what? Mallory used to be on the city task force, until he was quietly transferred to school security last year. Guess who recommended him? Simone already knew the answer before he said it. Brent Kavanaugh. Her stomach tightened. Brent, the officer who had shoved her in the courtroom lobby just hours ago. The one who didn't know she was his new police chief. Ray continued. And get this, Mallory and Brent used to work together in the same district. They were tight. Same rotation, same squad car sometimes. It was becoming clearer. Darius wasn't just some random student in the wrong place. He had been marked, not because he did anything wrong, but because someone had chosen to see him as a problem. And Brent's reaction to Simone? That wasn't about protocol. It was about control. About seeing someone who didn't look like a leader as a threat to the old way of doing things. Simone rubbed her forehead, the weight of the situation bearing down on her. "Did you find anything about the woman on the bus? The one who gave Darius the note?" Ray nodded slowly. "That's the strange part. Her name is Rachel Green. Recently moved back to the city. Used to be a civil rights attorney in Atlanta. Took on 3 high-profile police misconduct cases before stepping away from public law 2 years ago. She's been quiet since then, but some of her work, it was powerful, made a lot of enemies." Simone felt a chill crawl up her arms. This wasn't coincidence. Was she involved in any of Brent's cases? Ray shook his head. "No direct connection that I can see, but I'm digging deeper." "Keep going," Simone said, "and watch your back." As Ray left, Simone leaned back in her chair. The pieces were forming something bigger, something hidden under layers of procedure and appearances. Darius had unknowingly stepped into a network of people tied together by history, silence, and power. And the note he received wasn't just encouragement, it was a lifeline. From someone who had seen what this city could do to good people if no one stood up for them. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the city, Darius sat in his room, his backpack on the floor, and the note tucked safely in the pages of his notebook. He kept reading it over and over again, not fully understanding why it meant so much to him. But it did. It made him feel like someone finally saw him, not as a threat, not as a headline, but as a person. His mom knocked gently and stepped in. "You okay, baby?" He nodded, but she could tell something was on his mind. "You've been quiet since that bus ride." He hesitated. "That woman, she looked like she knew something, not just about me, about everything." His mom sat beside him, smoothing his hair like she used to when he was younger. "Sometimes people come into our lives for a reason, even if we don't know it yet." He looked at her. "What if I'm in trouble and don't know it either?" She hugged him. "Then we'll face it, together." Back at the precinct, Brent sat alone in the locker room, his hands clasped, face tight. His phone buzzed and he glanced at it. A message from someone named TM. "She's digging, shut it down, now." He deleted it. His pulse quickened. Brent had worked hard to climb the ranks, but not everything in his past was clean, and if Simone kept peeling back the layers, she'd find it all. The cover-ups, the silences, the favors he owed, and the mistakes he had buried. He walked to the mirror and looked at himself. For the first time in years, he didn't recognize the man looking back. In the shadows of the city, truths were beginning to stir. Stories long buried were finding breath again, and one woman's kindness on a crowded bus was starting to unravel. A web of secrets, fear, and silence. But no one, least of all Simone, knew just how deep it would go, or how dangerous it would become. Rain tapped against the glass windows of the precinct as Simone stared out, her arms folded tightly. The storm outside seemed to mirror the one building within her. Files were open across the table, records, photographs, notes, all pointing in the same direction. Officer Brent Kavanaugh was part of something much larger, and now the name TM, from the anonymous message Brent received, had started to show up in places that made her stomach turn. Ray had found surveillance footage, hidden in a hard drive from an old squad car. It was dusty and long forgotten, until now. In it, Brent and Trent Mallory sat talking inside their vehicle. The timestamp matched the day Darius had been written up. At first, it looked like a casual conversation. But then Brent had leaned in and said something chilling. "If he steps out of line again, you know what to do. We can't let these kids think they're untouchable." Those words echoed in Simone's mind like a warning bell. It wasn't just about one student or one incident. It was a system, a quiet network of control, fear, and manipulation. A pattern that had been hiding in plain sight under the protection of blue walls and sealed files. Ray burst into the room without knocking, his face pale and voice tense. "We've got a problem. Rachel Green's apartment was broken into last night, nothing stolen, just her laptop and some case folders." Simone stood up straight. "Anyone hurt?" "She wasn't there. Lucky she was staying with her sister for the weekend. But whoever did it wanted something specific, and they didn't bother to hide it." Simone's heart beat faster. She had a sinking feeling that Rachel's presence on that bus, her note to Darius, and her past work as a civil rights attorney weren't just chance. She had come back to the city with a purpose, maybe even to blow the lid off something dangerous. And now someone knew. "Pull her in," Simone said. "I want to talk to her today, face to face." An hour later, Rachel sat across from her. Simone's office. The rain still fell, shadows creeping along the walls. Rachel's face was calm, but her hands trembled just slightly. "I knew I was being watched," she said softly. "Even before the break-in, I didn't want to get anyone involved, but when I saw Darius on that bus, I couldn't just walk away." "Why him?" Simone asked. Rachel looked down. "He reminded me of a boy from one of my old cases in Atlanta. His name was Elijah, same smile, same kindness. Elijah didn't make it. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and no one stood up for him. I couldn't let that happen again." Simone leaned forward. "What did you find before you left the law?" Rachel hesitated. Then slowly she reached into her bag and pulled out a worn flash drive. These are records, internal emails, officer testimonies that were never meant to see daylight. It connects certain officers across different districts, including this one. People like Brent, Mallory, and a few others. They targeted kids, mostly young black boys, labeling them early. using school incidents to flag them in law enforcement databases. It was like pre-criminal profiling. If a kid had one mark on his school record, he was watched. Simone felt her stomach twist. This was beyond unethical. It was calculated. Rachel looked up. They thought they could control the future by controlling the data. At that moment, a sharp buzz came through Simone's phone. It was Ray. She answered. "What is it?" His voice was breathless. "Chief, you need to get out of the station, now. Someone leaked that you're investigating Brent. Internal systems are being locked. I think someone's trying to destroy evidence." Simone's mind raced. "Where are you?" "Outside." "I'll meet you at the back lot. Bring the drive." She hung up and stood. "We have to go." Rachel followed her without hesitation. The two women moved fast, weaving through quiet hallways and down a stairwell that led to the basement exit. As they reached the lot, Ray's car was already running, but just as they opened the door, a black SUV turned the corner sharply, headlights blazing through the rain. "Get in!" Ray shouted. They scrambled into the car, tires screeching as he peeled away. In the rearview mirror, the SUV followed, steady and deliberate. "They're not even hiding it," Rachel whispered. Simone clutched the flash drive tightly. "They don't have to, not yet." The chase wasn't fast, but it was tense. Ray weaved through side streets, taking turns that didn't make sense, hoping to lose their tail. Finally, after 15 minutes, they turned into a private underground parking lot near City Records. The SUV didn't follow, not right away. Inside, the three of them sat in silence, breathing heavily. Simone broke it first. "We're running out of time. If they get ahead of this, it won't just be about saving Darius's future. It'll be about saving our own." Ray nodded. "We still have one shot. There's a city council meeting tomorrow night. If we can get the flash drive to the mayor, present the evidence publicly. They'll try to stop us before then." Rachel interrupted. Simone's voice was steady. "Then we don't stop moving." Back at the precinct, Brent sat in his office, eyes on the security camera footage of Simone's escape. His phone buzzed again. "TM. You've got one last chance. She's becoming a problem. Handle it." Brent's hands shook slightly as he typed a reply. "Brent, what if she exposes all of us?" The reply came instantly. "TM. Then you go down with the rest." The room felt like it was closing in. Brent could feel everything collapsing around him. Years of loyalty, secrets, and silence were cracking. And Simone, this woman he had dismissed as just another pencil pusher, had turned out to be the one person strong enough to drag it all into the light. But it wasn't over yet. And Brent wasn't ready to go down, not without a fight. And somewhere, far from the chaos, Darius sat quietly in the school library, unaware that his small act of kindness had ignited a storm that was sweeping across the city. He had no idea. People were fighting in the shadows to protect him, to uncover the truth and to make sure this time, just this once, the system didn't win. But that storm was heading toward him, and the center was about to explode. Simone barely had time to catch her breath before her phone buzzed again. This time, the message wasn't from Ray or anyone she knew. It was anonymous and chillingly direct. "You think you're protecting Darius? You don't even know what he's really involved in." Her fingers trembled as she stared at the screen. What could that mean? Darius, the kind-hearted teenager who had simply given up his seat on a bus and received a mysterious note? What secret could he possibly be hiding? She called Ray immediately. "We need to dig deeper into Darius's background. There's something we're missing." Ray was already on it. Within the hour, he came back with a folder thick with juvenile records, some sealed, others barely visible in the system. One file stood out. An incident from 2 years ago, something buried deep. Darius had been questioned in connection with a minor theft at a local convenience store. The case was closed quickly, but the details were vague, and no charges were ever pressed. The store owner had dropped the complaint suddenly, refusing to talk to police. What if this was all planted? Simone wondered aloud. What if someone was trying to build a file on him before he even knew? Ray nodded grimly. That's exactly what it looks like. But the question is why, and who? As Simone pondered this, her office door swung open. Rachel stepped in, her face pale and eyes wide with urgency. "You need to see this." She handed over a tablet with a video clip paused on the screen. It was footage from a traffic camera. Darius walking late at night near a known gang hotspot. Someone was following him. And then a quick exchange happened with a figure who wasn't caught on camera clearly, but the timing and location were suspicious. Simone's heart pounded. This was new. This was dangerous. Suddenly, Darius wasn't just a victim of a corrupt system. He was potentially caught in a web of something more complex and threatening. Before they could discuss further, the phone rang again. This time it was Brent. His voice was low, strained, but not hostile. "Chief Simone, we need to talk. Alone." Simone hesitated, aware this could be a trap. But if Brent wanted to talk, maybe there was more to uncover. Maybe he was on edge. Because the walls were closing in on him too. They agreed to meet at a neutral location, a quiet cafe downtown. As she arrived, Simone noticed Brent already seated, eyes flickering with something unreadable. Fear, regret, or something darker. He leaned forward, voice barely a whisper. "You don't know the half of what's going on. Darius, he's been used. Not just by the system, but by people with dangerous intentions. People who want to destabilize the city's fragile peace. And if you push too hard, innocent lives will get hurt." Simone stared at him, trying to parse truth from bluff. "Why tell me this now?" "Because I'm running out of time," Brent said. "And because I don't want to be the fall guy when it all blows up." The cafe door opened and Rachel stepped inside, eyes scanning the room. When she saw Brent, her jaw tightened. "This isn't over," she said, voice sharp. "And the longer we wait, the worse it gets." Simone realized then that this tangled story was no longer just about a racist cop or a single young man. It was about power, control, and hidden agendas that reached far beyond any one precinct. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the storm inside the city was only beginning to roar louder. And somewhere, in the shadows, someone was pulling strings. Ready to strike next. Simone knew one thing for sure. Nothing was as it seemed. And the real fight was just ahead.